Good evening. As we are continuing working our way through, working our way through the Old Testament is what we're accomplishing right now. We are in the middle of David's narrative block, and as we're looking at David's story, how does his story really begin? Like, we're introduced to David with what? Well, even before Goliath, his anointing, that he is very specifically chosen as someone in a field with sheep and brought in and then anointed. And if you recall, through that story, it's almost kind of cool that his name is not even mentioned until after the anointing. And then even at that point, he's not named by name until the Spirit of the Lord comes upon David, the son of Jesse. And so we're introduced to him as somebody very specifically chosen by God before anything else. And remember, we talked about the three-step process for the king. You have a private anointing, followed by then a what? A demonstration, which his demonstration would be what narrative then? What story? All right, here's where the Goliath story fits in. This is his great demonstration. He springs to the forefront, becomes the great warrior, and begins to be compared to the king. And people kind of look at him as even greater than the king. And you kind of follow David's story. There's a couple things maybe that are somewhat questionable, but by and large, his story is pretty positive, isn't it? I mean, he's successful in just about everything that he does. He's on the run for most of the pages that he's there in 1 Samuel. But even then, he is behind the scenes doing kingly type stuff, like at the cave of Adullam or other places where he's taking care of people in ways that Saul was not. So that after you get to the end of 1 Samuel, you have the great battle with the Philistines, and Saul dies, Jonathan dies, all of Saul's children die. Who then inevitably is going to be declared king by all the people? David. So we know that this is going to happen. And everything is just so positive. He's declared king. He defeats the Philistines, remember, which was the great army, the great people that God wanted to have subdued. He started with Samson, and Saul wasn't the guy to do that. David is the guy to do that. And it's so positive. He takes Jerusalem from the Jebusites. And then what does he have brought into Jerusalem? Yeah, the ark. He has the ark brought in, and there's rejoicing. And I mean, these are all festive, great, incredible things that are going on. You could say the future is so bright, David has to walk around with shades on, right? I mean, that's how amazing everything is going for David. And it gets even better when you get to 2 Samuel chapter 7 that we talked about last week, when David says to Nathan, the prophet, why not Samuel? He just doesn't like Samuel anymore? Samuel's dead. Yeah, Samuel has died by this point, and Nathan now is the one who fills Samuel's shoes as the prophet to the king. We have Nathan now is the one. He comes to Nathan the prophet, and he's like, this is kind of backwards. Here I am in this nice, beautiful house, and God is living in what? He's living in a tent. That's messed up. It should be the absolute reverse. I want to build a nice, beautiful palace. Or what word do we often use? Temple. Temple, palace, in the Hebrew, it's the same word. It's just the house for God, or the palace for God. He goes, I want to build one of those for God. And Nathan's like, yeah, do it. What's the answer, though? Yeah. God sends Nathan back to him and says, no. Tell him, put the brakes on this one right now. He's not going to do this for me. And why? Do you remember we talked about this last week? We connected it with the Chronicles account, chapter 28.
He had a job to do as a warrior. It was not fulfilled, and that was his purpose for being there. That was what his commission to do, not to build the house.
All right, John said, because he had a job to do as a warrior. That was his job, and he was not going to be commissioned to build the house. Did I catch what you said well enough? Okay, yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Remember, he said in the Chronicles account, that I can't do this. I was told I can't do this because I have shed blood. And remember, we talked about how it wasn't that the shedding of blood is something that made him disqualified. Just as John said, I think John just nailed it. His job was not to build the temple. His job was to finish the conquering of the land, to drive out the peoples that were there. Because remember in 2 Samuel chapter 7, God said, I will plant. It's a future thing to have them planted in the land the way that he wants it. And it's almost as if God is saying, look, as far as I'm concerned right now, we are still in the middle of the conquest. It's not over yet. I don't want a permanent place until y'all have finished what you started with Joshua. And so that's David's role. That's his job, is to finish the conquest of the land so that once he's done that, what is his son going to do? All right, his son is going to be the one who's going to build that temple for God. So God says, you can't build my house, but what?
Your son.
Okay, your son will, but what does God say he'll do for David? All right, he says, you can't build my house, but I will build your house. I will give you an enduring dynasty that's going to last forever. I will make it to where there will always be a king of your lineage on the throne, and I will be just like a what to him? A father to him. He will be like a son to me. In other words, we're going to have this kind of relationship where his authority comes straight from his relationship with me. And even then, he says, when he sins, I will what? Is he going to just let him get away with sin? No, he says, I will reprove him. I will punish him with the stripes of men, but he won't do what? Okay. All right, he won't depart from him. He's not going to take the kingdom away from David and away from David's family like he took it from whom? Like he took it from Saul. This is a huge moment because what we have at this point officially, remember we just kind of have everybody, right? We have everyone. And then in Genesis chapter 12, this funneled down to what? As far as people of the promise. In Genesis 12, it funnels down to, all right, Abraham's family, right? So in Genesis chapter 12, it narrows down to Abraham's family. And now in 2 Samuel chapter 7, it narrows down again to what? All right. Now it's very specifically the line of David, the rulers of David moving down. So that's what's happened. The covenant, we often call it the Davidic covenant or the covenant with David, 2 Samuel chapter 7, has now brought us to where we have a focused point moving forward that the promises are ultimately going to come through him. Does that make sense? And why 2 Samuel 7 is so important that it's one of the 5 key passages of the Old Testament. Genesis 3, Genesis 12, Exodus 24, and now 2 Samuel chapter 7. Again, unbelievable stuff that's happening here. David, he's on just a meteoric rise, And it is just, you watch his career and his story as it unfolds the next couple chapters. You have victories that he has in warfare, chapter 8. You have him with the guy named Mephibosheth, and we're not going to go into that and talk about that. But it's fulfilling a promise that he had made to Jonathan to show kindness to Saul's house, and is able to do that with Mephibosheth. And then chapter 10, you have the outside forces of Ammon and Syria that are coming up against Israel. And it almost looks like a desperate situation for Israel. And David splits his army up, puts his trust in God, and says, let's go take them. And they do. And so now you have, at this point, the Syrian forces, they're just like, you know what, we're done, we're out, we'll pay tribute to you, just leave us alone, which leaves really at this point only the Ammonites that are, major enemies there. And that brings us then into chapter 11. 2 Samuel chapter 11. As we've now gotten down to just a few enemies, major enemies that are left. There's still going to be warfare. He's still got battles to go. There's still things that he's going to do, pockets of Philistines, things like that. But as far as the major enemies that have to be conquered, we're seeing now the Ammonites are kind of the final ones here. And you would anticipate that as we go into chapter 11, what's going to happen? Yeah, it's time to finish up things with the Ammonites. That's the way the chapter 10 ends, right? They defeat the Syrians and the Ammonites together. And, verse 19, chapter 10, verse 19, when all the kings who were the servants of Hadadezer saw that they'd been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel, became subject to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. So we're just cruising right along. And you go into chapter 11, it's like, all right, here we go. We're going to finish this up. It's time to finish up the Ammonites. And so chapter 11 in verse 1, in the spring of the year, the time when the kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. That's exactly what we expect to happen, isn't it? They're going out to fight the Ammonites. They besiege, the Ammonite, the capital city, and everything else. This narrative, it looks like, just at first glance, is going to be exactly what we would anticipate. Further action by David to solidify Israel's place that God wants them to have, except that there's one little problem. What is that? All right. David does not go out to fight. In the days that the kings go out to fight, David sent Joab and the armies with him, and they did what they were supposed to do, but then you get this little tidbit, David what? David remained in Jerusalem. Now, this is one of those stories right here. We've seen the story, the text, everything. The story's been moving quickly over the last few chapters, right? It slows down to a crawl here in chapter 11. That's really important. When you see, things are just kind of flying through, and then all of a sudden you get to a point, and then the story just really stretches out. Those are highly emphatic places in the Hebrew text. And this story is going to be quite the narrative, and it's going to assume that you are going to treat it like a story, that you're going to read through it. This is one of the greatest examples of Hebrew authors throwing tidbits of information that you would say, why is that there? Why do I need to know that? Why is this interesting? And they don't tell you why. They want you to do the work. They're just giving you enough information, and they are inviting you to read between the lines and figure out, oh, okay, I guess this is why. Oh, this makes sense. Oh, this is a clue that connects this point to this point. So the very first one of those just little tidbits that's thrown in there, David remained at Jerusalem. Now you could just say he sent the army and he stayed at Jerusalem. And that's fine. Think about it more deeply though. What is this saying? Yeah, John, do you have more than one sentence? Okay, we'll wait for the microphone to come up. Kelly was sitting down in the back. He might have even been taking a nap. I'm not sure. Possible. All right, go ahead.
That was a great segue. My mind's going back to the fact that he wanted to build a temple. And then God said, no, you got to shed more blood. Now, this wasn't the kid that went out to meet Goliath. This was years later. He'd been through all these battles, and this was a proven warrior that may have been very well getting tired. And I want to play the Chris's mind game. Is it possible that he was just tired? And when you pop up in chapter 11 here, he says he sent his people out when it's time to war, but he didn't go. He knew what was going to happen. He knew that he had to wield the sword just like he did from Goliath on to win all those mighty battles, and that's not a fun thing to do. And he did it with might and strength, and I'm playing the guessing game that maybe he was getting to the point where he said enough is enough. Maybe, possibly, I don't know.
Okay.
And that he just, he says, I'm tired. But he still did what God wanted him to do, but in this case, he sent his guys out instead of him, and he stayed home.
All right. So it is very possible that the reasoning behind this is reaching a point. Maybe I'm gonna amend that just ever so slightly, where it may not be tired so much as I've done my job. It's basically done at this point, right? They've just defeated the Ammonites. All that they have left is just to kind of do mop-up duty. And he may be thinking, do I even need to be present for that? Is this something that, is this the same thing that I have been doing? And so, yeah, I mean, that very well, that idea of, I mean, I don't know if exhaustion or tired's the right word, but maybe it gets to it. He's ready for that. He's ready for a break.
It's what God said. You're a man that has shed blood to apply to what he realized as a warrior. And when he said, you got to go out and shed more blood, that may have been affecting him also. Because I went in here to guys to come back and talk about war, they say enough is enough. I don't want to go back and do it again. Maybe shedding other men's blood was getting to him. I don't know. That would be my speculation. And maybe that's where he was. He just didn't want to do it no more. But he wanted to do God's will. He was faithful to God, so he would go do what he did do. But he just ended up staying home.
Yeah, I would only push back on that he does later. I mean, he still fights. He hasn't reached. Yeah, he hasn't reached that point. Dale, did you have your hand up?
I didn't, but I will.
Oh, okay. Is it that easy to make you comment? I'll just remember that. I'll be like, Dale, did you have your hand up? And and you're like, well, I guess I have to now.
I was thinking maybe I did it without thinking. No, that doesn't make sense. I hate to even have this thought I have, but is it possible David planned the whole thing? This was not the first time he'd seen Bathsheba. Verse 2 makes it sound like a spur of the moment or a coincidental thing, but I just wondered about that possibility.
I think the way that it's written, I would push back against that. That idea that the entire thing is preconceived because of the way that the author tells that part of the story. I don't think he's inviting us to speculate that this has happened before.
And that wouldn't be consistent with the man of God's will.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. But again, these are the kinds of questions to ask and to say, what are we being invited? And you throw them out and you contemplate, you think about it, and you say, okay, well, this one, maybe it doesn't fit what we know of David, before. Maybe this one doesn't work. Maybe this doesn't fit in the story. Whatever the case is, when you're given just little tidbits like this, you're not always invited to simply speculate on a story. I think we understand that. But sometimes the author throws things out for you to look at and say, now why is that right there? What am I supposed to get from this? And there are multiple of those types of statements that are here. I think just simplest, before moving on, we are supposed to see that David, first of all, is shirking responsibility. The kings are supposed to be out in battle. This is the time that the kings go out to battle, and David sends somebody else. So at the very least, David sends somebody else to do the job that he is supposed to be doing. Does that make sense? The kings go out to battle, David stayed in Jerusalem. Now, if the kings are supposed to be out in battle, then what are kings supposed to be doing in their capital cities? What's that? Someone said nothing? Did I hear nothing? Nothing is the correct answer. Yes, good job, Eliza. That's right. Kings have nothing to do if they stay behind, if their job at the moment is to be on the battlefield, right? I mean, does that make sense? It's not like he stayed behind because he was supposed to be there to take care of affairs of the state or anything like that. No, he's sitting back, and he's sitting back with nothing to occupy his time. He's not supposed to be there. There are no duties or responsibilities here because his duties and his responsibilities are on the battlefield right now, and he's not there. So what is he going to do at home? Well, this is just throw it. This is not a long answer. What's he going to do at home? Just say it, John. Yep. All right. So, yeah, John says if you got idle hands, you're going to get into mischief. That's exactly it. He is sitting around basically doing nothing. In fact, Julia pointed this one out to me one time. At verse 2, it happened late one afternoon when David what? Got up from the couch, got up from reclining. In other words, what's he doing? He's sitting around sleeping all day. Right? I mean, he's just lounging around. What else is he going to do? He's got nothing to do. And so he's like, oh, man, well, I've slept about as much as I can sleep. I guess I better get up now and find something to do. And so he's just sitting there twiddling his thumbs, walking around. Here it is, evening. He just got up out of bed, and he's like, well, I guess I'll take a walk around the roof, or whatever the case is. And so he strolled around on the roof of the palace, and from the roof, what does he see? No. He's supposed to be able to see the army right now, right? What does he see? All right, he sees a woman who is bathing. Now, does the text invite you to think anything of this woman? Does the text invite you to make any judgment about this woman? No. She is not active in this text. She is a passive participant, and this has absolutely nothing at all. The text here, the story, has nothing at all to do with what she is or is not doing. So there is no judgment that's placed on her, because, and I say that, I'm stressing that, because I've heard a lot that she is complicit for bathing in such a way that somebody would be able to see her. And that's just not what the text is pulling out. She is a passive individual in this text. And by the way, where is she? Does it say that? Where was she? We have no idea. Most people, I mean, at least, you think, well, she's on her housetop or whatever, rooftop, and he's on his, and we don't know. She may be tucked into a room, and he may be looking through a window or something like that, or, we have no idea. Yeah, Cliff? Uh-huh.
And so I can imagine that if it was in the evening, could have been late in the evening, he can't sleep. He thinking about what's going on, with the war or whatever, or he's bored. Or
I
thinking
think you're
of other
giving him
things.
too much credit there.
And then he gets up in
Yeah.
the evening, goes out and sees her bathing. She's bathing in the evening, not in the afternoon.
Yeah,
So she thinks that she's in a private place.
yeah, I think so.
and has privacy. That's the way I kind of read it, because mine says evening. It doesn't say afternoon.
Yeah, and I didn't work through a translation of this, but at least the one that say late afternoon, they say late afternoon. So it would be probably equivalent to an early evening, probably type of an idea. Connie?
And she might have assumed that all of the men were gone fighting.
Yeah? Yeah, exactly. So, again, all I'm trying to stress is this is not a judgment on Bathsheba. This story right here is not. This is all about David, who's supposed to be in battle. Instead, he's walking around his roof. And by the way, is there anything just inherently wrong with him seeing a woman who is bathing? No, an accidental, he sees it. What's the problem? Okay, well, before he followed through, what's the problem? Well, even before that, he didn't turn his eyes. He saw her, and then he saw her, right? It wasn't just, maybe an accidental, oh, wow, okay, you know what? I'm going to go to the other side of the roof now. Nothing at all wrong with that accidental scenario. But does he do that? No, he makes sure that he gets an eyeful. And he stays there enough to elicit thoughts within his mind that he begins to think what? Yeah. The thought, John said that I'm a king. I can have her brought to me. The thought in his mind that says, okay, I need her in my bed. That is where a line gets crossed. And so he sees this, a beautiful woman, and he sent someone to inquire about her. And he said, this person said, isn't this Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? Now, again, read between some lines. Okay, what do you want to say, Kelly? Go ahead.
Reading between the lines.
Huh?
I've been reading between the lines on that one.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Uriah was one of David's mighty men, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was one of David's 30, I got your back.
Yeah.
David knew who Bathsheba was. Probably. My company commander knew all his sergeants' wives when I went overseas. And not very well. He knew who they were. He didn't just cross a line. He crossed a line on this one. And he didn't care when he did it until he was going to get caught.
Yes. The only thing I would say, he genuinely seems to not know who she is.
Yes, but the guy told him.
Okay, once he knows.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Who would David send, by the way? Who gets sent? Who runs these kinds of menial tasks? Servants. All right? Tuck that thought away in the back of your mind for just a little bit. The people that get sent to do these types of things are servants. And so he sends somebody to inquire about her. And this guy's like, oh, this is Bathsheba. This is the daughter of Eliam. And by that, we later are going to find out the granddaughter of, does anybody know? Isaac, do you know? I'm putting you on the spot here because you've told me his name recently. Oh, poor Maya. She knows.
Was this the guy at FC camp?
Well, he was not at FC camp, but yes, it was at FC camp that you told me his name.
It's not pronounced like this. Hawthorpe or whatnot.
All right. That was just about the best beginning a word and mumbling the rest of it I think that I've heard in a long time. That was, yeah, Maya, do you want to, can you fill in the blank on it or, nope, okay, all right, that's fine. Yeah, that's exactly right. Isaac is right. This is the granddaughter of Ahithophel, which was one of the leading counselors for the kings, for David. And that little tidbit's going to come up later in the next narrative that's going to come with the rebellion to come. So these are those little lines, the little things that are being written, the information that's being given to you that you're supposed to then tuck away, and then it comes back out, and you're like, whoa, okay, now I'm starting to connect some dots. So, and then Kelly already let us know exactly who this Uriah the Hittite is, one of the mighty men. Remember, we talked about these mighty men just very briefly because we talked about the three in particular who went on a recon mission in a sermon recently to do what for David? Yeah, that's right. Good job, Joshua. They got him some water from the well at Bethlehem. And so that was just one of the stories of the great deeds of these mighty men, and Uriah the Hittite is mentioned. By the way, he's Uriah the what? The Israelite? What's that? The Hittite. What does that tell you? What's that? The son of Heth? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So you've got that lineage, the son of Heth, from much farther up. What else? I'm looking more general here, just very, very, very non-specific. Go ahead, Ryan.
Weren't the Hittites the people that made an agreement with the Israelites that they wouldn't be destroyed when they came up through?
Okay, that would be the Gibeonites.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hittites would be another larger nation, if my memory is correct, to the north, but it may not be. So I would have to relook at a map just to make sure. Yeah, Kelly?
David drew all kinds of people to him when he was on the lam, and this was one of them. And it wasn't an Israelite,
Yeah.
but they were tight.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a guy, not even an Israelite. He gives up his home, his heritage, his gods. He gives up everything and walks into service for David. He gives up everything for David, right? He kind of will, right? So, just again, laying this foundation, this guy is not an Israelite. He has defected. He's now with David. And so David finds out, and even if David had in his head, I really want to get her into my bed with me, that's wrong. Once he finds out who this is, that should do what? Yeah, exactly. Story is over at this point. It's like, whoa, what was I even thinking? You know what? Not touching that, not going anywhere near this. That's Uriah's wife. boy, am I glad that I asked first. That's how it should go from here. And we think, man, I can't believe David failed so badly that he wanted to do this, right? Is that how the story ends? No, because then what does he do? All right, now he sends his messengers or servants again to go and get her and bring her to him. And he does bring her into his bed. Now, at this point, you can say she probably shouldn't have done this, right? Did she have a choice? There's always a choice. Would this choice have been easy? No. I mean, consider the ramifications, everything that's involved in this. I happen to think that a lot of this is going on against her will, against what she desires. But this is what happens. So David sent messengers to get her. When she came to him, he slept with her. And then we're given just this random little bit of information that you're like, wait, what? Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. What does that mean? Okay, so John just said that's why she was bathing. Yes, the bathing in particular is her cleansing herself, purifying herself from her uncleanliness. What was the word? Impurity. I'll just go with that. Yes. Go ahead, Kelly.
She was just in the way of women. There's no way, if there's a baby, it's her husband's.
Yeah. All right, so you just totally threw out everything there. I hadn't even asked the question, what does it mean? Yeah, what this phrase is to let us know, the author's like, by the way, she is coming off her period, and that's why she was cleansing herself. And you ask, what are the ramifications? Why do I need to know that information? Why do I need to know why she was bathing? Well, that's going to come very quickly. In fact, Kelly already spoiled the story for us, so, the woman, verse 5, conceived and sent word to inform David, I am pregnant. So if she was just purifying herself for that impurity, what does this mean for this baby? It's David's. There is no possible way this child is anybody else's, because she was purifying herself after coming through in her menstrual cycle. So, David sends orders to Joab. We can speed up here just a little bit. He says, send me Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sent Uriah to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked, how's Joab? How are the troops doing? How's the war going? Can you imagine the absolute confusion on Uriah's part? Because Uriah is one of David's what?
Mighty men.
Thank you. Good job. Yep. He's one of David's mighty men. What does he do as one of David's mighty men? Well, in particular, he fights. He's a warrior. He wants to be on the battlefield. That's where he excels. And so he's gone to the battlefield, and now for some reason Joab says, hey, Uriah, you need to go back with David, who is supposed to also be on the battlefield, right? If he needed to talk to David, it should be just a matter of walking to his tent, not leaving the battlefield to go to his house. And so he leaves, he comes back, and he comes into David, and David's like, so, how's it going? The battle. Hey, you guys are fighting a battle, aren't you? How's that going? You guys winning? kind of losing? You know, how's that battle going? All right, good talk. That was great. Yeah. You know, and he just has to be like, really? I had to leave to come here to have a conversation about how the battle is going. You couldn't have sent messengers. The messenger who brought word to you saying, send Uriah back, he couldn't have just come back with that information himself? I mean, can you see Uriah just being completely blown away, trying to figure out what is going on? And then David, you know, he says, you know what, Uriah, why don't you go on down to your house and wash your feet? Why don't you just go on down there and take it easy? Get off your feet for a little bit, you know, make yourself presentable again. What is he hoping is going to happen? Well, yeah, he's hoping that he'll take advantage of being able to spend the night there with his wife. And then, a few months later, what's going to happen? 8, 9 months later, depending on how long it took him to get back from the battlefield. Yeah, he'll be, you know, he'll be able to lay claim to this child and say, "This is my kid," and nobody would be the wiser, right? So this is why he comes back. And Uriah then left the palace, and a gift from the king followed him, and he went back and he slept with his wife, right? Oh no, where does he sleep? He sleeps at the door of the palace. Oh, and by the way, who does he actually sleep with? Like, who's there? All these servants. Well, that's interesting. What do the servants know? Everything. And by the way, do you think the servants are happy about what David is doing? I mean, do you think you would be happy about this and becoming complicit in it by having to be the one to go and do this or do that or whatever the case is? No, servants talk, and this is something that often gets, you see servants every now and then in various stories within the scriptures. Servants come up, and really it's not just here. In all of literature, servants come up as the people that people don't realize are listening. You know, they take them for granted. They just assume that they're, you know, beneath notice, and so they don't pay much attention to them. And they're the ones who have a tendency to know everything. So it's really interesting that he stays where the servants sleep. And then David finds out Uriah didn't go home. And so he brings Uriah back in and he says, "What gives? You just came from a long journey. Why didn't you go home?" And I tell you what, this answer that he gives right here is so telling. He first of all talks about the what? The ark of Israel and Judah is what? No, that was an earlier story, but good try on that, Joshua. But what does he say? Yeah, Olivia? Okay, no, it hasn't been stolen. Okay, the ark is living in tents. Now, that may be that they brought the ark with them to the battlefield, which I think is the case. And so everything is in tents. But even then, at the same time, even if they didn't, it's still in tents. By the way, who has made a comment about that before? David did, right? Now, I will say this. I have looked this one up. It's a separate Hebrew word than what you find in 2 Samuel chapter 7. So it is important to know he's not using the exact same Hebrew word, but the principle is exactly the same. When David came to God and said, I live in this nice palace while the ark of God lives in tents. Uriah comes to David as David's in the midst of his worst nefarious kind of activity, and his words get thrown back in his face. Now, does Uriah know what he said to God? I don't think so. I don't think that's what Uriah is doing. But we do, right? As the readers, we see that 2 Samuel chapter 7 is being alluded to in David's worst downfall kind of a moment. So he says, the ark of Israel, Judah dwell in tents. Joab and his soldiers are camping in the open field. How can I enter my house to eat and drink? Right? He says, how can I go and enjoy the refreshments of my house? Why would I do that? Any of y'all translations have anything else, by the way? Does he add anything? Huh? Whoa, wait, what? Lie with his, to sleep with his wife? Whoa, hold on. Where did that come from? What? Has David said anything about that? Has anybody said anything? Why would he say, all David said is, hey, go home, wash your feet. Go home, enjoy this gift that I'm giving to you. Eat, drink, be merry. Go do all of this at home. And then Uriah shows up and he goes, why would I go when the ark is in tents, Joab's on the battlefield where he's supposed to be, all the people are on the battlefield where they're supposed to be, and I'm stuck here. Why would I sleep with my wife? Where does that idea come from? What puts that in his head that that's what David is trying to get him to do? Because servants talk, I really think. I think when Uriah confronts David here, when they're having this conversation, if we read between these lines, I think he knows exactly what's happened. And he is throwing it in David's face. David has said absolutely nothing about going and enjoying your wife. Hasn't come up in conversation, hasn't even been alluded to. But Uriah brings it up. And he says, when Joab's out there, the army's out there, God is in the tent out there, I'm not going to be home sleeping with my wife. Like who did? Like David. This is a slap in David's face, is what he's doing. It's almost as close to an accusation as you can get without him actually accusing him. And so he says, as surely as you live by your life, I will not do this. And so David says, all right, just stay here today and tomorrow I will send you back. So he stays, and then David invited Uriah to eat and drink with him so that he got drunk. And he went out in the evening, and where did he sleep? He did not do what? He didn't go home. You know why? Because Uriah drunk has more honor than David. Uriah, in a verschnickered state of mind, is still able to resist sleeping with his wife when that's something that nobody else in the army is able to do, and it's not something that he is willing to do. So what's David to do? All right. Okay, so I'm gonna take all the stuff that you said in the beginning, and I'm not going to worry about that just yet because we haven't gotten there yet, but I'm going to focus on the last thing. He has to kill Uriah because he cannot get Uriah to do what he wants him to do. And so innocent people have to die for him to be able to cover it up. By the way, this isn't the first time that you see this type of thing happen in David's life. We haven't talked about Ziklag, but some of the stuff in Ziklag follows the same type of procedure when he was there. So he wrote a letter to Joab. This is what John was saying that he did. And in the letter he says, put Uriah in front of the fiercest fighting and then retreat from him so that he is struck down and he dies. Put yourself in Joab's place now. Uriah is brought from the battlefield, and Joab is thinking, there goes one of what? There goes one of my mighty men. There goes one of my best fighters. Why is David taking him from the front line? This doesn't make any sense. And then the letter comes back where David says to Joab, hey, put him in a spot where he's going to be vulnerable, and he's going to be overwhelmed and overrun, and call a retreat, like call a retreat he doesn't know or something like that, so that he dies. In other words, he's telling Joab to what? Assassinate him, murder him. He is making Joab complicit. And poor Joab, that's just what he has to do, huh? What does Joab do? When Joab was besieging the city, he put Uriah in the place where he knew what? Say that again, Jason. Oh, who was it? Ryan? Okay. It was one of those voices back in the corner. Go ahead.
Strongest defenders were.
Okay. So put him in the place where the strongest defenders were. Let me see if yeah, what do you have? Is that how it reads there in verse 16? All right. Do y'all have valiant men? What is that what yours says there, Ryan? No, mine says where the strongest defenders were. Okay. I don't like that translation. I mean, I don't, not that I don't like your translation. Just for that phrase, though, I think that is missing just a little bit. It's not that the strongest defenders were there. I like the idea of the valiant men. The CSB says the best enemy soldiers. I think valiant men really kind of captures the idea. And when he puts them there, does he put them there and call a retreat? What does it say? The men of the city came out and attacked Joab, and what? Yeah, some of the men from David's soldiers fell in battle. In other words, does Joab follow orders? He does not. He gets this message from David and says, that's stupid. There's absolutely no way that I'm going to just simply murder Uriah in this way. He deserves better than that. So what he does is he gives Uriah an opportunity, if he's going to die valiantly, to die with glory. He says, where are the people on the other side that I can pit him against, put them side by side against? Not to make sure that he dies, but to make sure that if he dies in such a way that he gains honor and glory through his death, because he gets to fight the very valiant of them. If somebody goes out against Goliath, do you say that guy was a wimp because he died? If he loses? No. You know, you have two strong warriors going at it. There's no shame in that death. There's no dishonor. That's what Joab gives Uriah, a chance to die with honor. And he says, I don't care what you say, David. I'm not going to do this. And so they send Uriah out, and he does indeed die. So they send word back to David, and we're going to kind of skip over some of this. We're up on the end of our time right now. And they send word back to David to let him know that they had lost this particular engagement, but that Uriah the Hittite was dead. So verse 25, David told the messenger, well, tell Joab, don't let this matter upset you, because the sword devours all alike. Intensify your fight against the city and demolish it. Verse 26, when Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah had died, what did she do? No. She mourned for him. Do you think she had a good relationship with him? I think she does. And by the way, who is her grandfather? Again, we mentioned him earlier. Everyone's like, I don't want to take a chance on that name. Yeah, it's Ahithophel, right? We'll do the Isaac. It's Ahithophel, right? Yeah, it's Ahithophel. I know this. We're going to talk about this. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but during the Absalom rebellion, who does Ahithophel side with? Does he side with David? No. He goes against David. He goes to the other side. What in the world could possibly cause this man to go away from the line, go away from David, the one that he's counseled, the one that he has been loyal to, and side against him with the one in rebellion against him? What could possibly have triggered that?
Him not obeying what David said.
What do you guys think? What could cause that? I'm sorry, what? Because of what David does to his granddaughter. David might think he's gotten away with everything, nobody knows, nobody understands. I don't think Bathsheba is happy about the way everything goes down. And I think Ahithophel's choice is a demonstration that the family is not happy about the way that things went down. And there will be repercussions to these actions. And we're going to talk more about those next week. All right, we're at time, so I'm going to turn things over to Richard. Good discussion, guys. Thanks.